Hello, I'm Portia Parker Griffin, and I want to welcome you to the Career 101 podcast, a place for ambitious professionals and seasoned executives who want an edge in their career. We're talking about all of the things you were never taught or told when it comes to career growth, development, and change. Now, let's get into it. Today, we are talking about the transformational leadership style with Hakim Lakhdar. Hakim is a fractional coach and Florida's #1 transformational leadership coach. Through his work, Hakim empowers high-performing professionals across business, sports, and entertainment to lead themselves and others with clarity, confidence, and compassion. With nearly 2 decades of experience developing senior leaders and professional education programs at top institutions, Hakim blends his expertise with a rich and diverse background, from acting and performing to international team management. An NLP certified coach with advanced certifications in coaching and personal development, Hakim's unique and insight-driven approach helps clients address the most significant issues, not just the obvious ones, so they can reveal their full power and achieve lasting transformation. Hi, Hakim. How are you today?
Hi, that was a mouthful. I like it though. I appreciate that intro. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. We want to roll out the red carpet for you, Hakim. I am excited to have you with us to discuss the transformational leadership style. But first, we want to know a little more about you. So tell me about 7-year-old Hakim.
Oh, 7-year-old Hakeem. Well, I have 7-year-old twin boys, so I get to watch me in them all the time.
Mhm.
I got the question recently, so how long have you been coaching? And my go-to response is I've been coaching since I was 7 years old. So it's fitting that you asked me that question. I was the kid whose friend was picked last for kickball and, would sort of shuffle off with their head down. And I'd say, you know what, I'm going to sit this game out. And I'd go walk the fence line. And we'd talk about why getting picked last for kickball was okay. And that there's always tomorrow and you can get better at kickball. And, you know, I was a little coach. I've always been that guy. I've always been that little kid. I was fun loving. I was silly. I was worried. I was a worried little 7-year-old, I think, probably. Thought a lot about people, thought a lot about feelings, thought a lot about situations that I was in and, what layers there were to each of those. My third grade teacher asked my parents, why is he always so worried? Is he always worried like this? I just was a big thinker and a big feeler. And I think that's served me actually really well in my life.
So, what did 7-year-old Hakim want to be when he grew up, as he was thinking and worrying about these things?
Hmm. I think I wanted to be a teacher. My father was a very passionate, he's still with us, but he is retired, and he was a professor of special education for 44 years. And when you hear people talk about, loving what they do and never working a day in their life because they love what they do, he was that guy. He was someone who absolutely loved what he did. He was deeply passionate about that work. And I loved that. It was inspiring to me. And I thought, I want to have that same feeling. I want to teach people. I want to, develop and create with people who are eager to learn. And teaching was something I thought I ultimately would want to do.
Love that. So, Hakeem, tell us about some highlights or pivotal moments in your career before you started your business.
Well, so one of the things that I found interesting was, throughout my career, I was working in the legal profession as a non-lawyer. And I was always working with lawyers, but not someone who was aspiring to go to law school, but really was passionate about professional development, leadership, management training. So I was always confronted with this, well, what are you doing here? Kind of response to my involvement in certain things because I wasn't a legal professional. I didn't have a legal background. I wasn't aspiring to go into the legal profession. So there was always this question of, well, why lawyers? And to me, honestly, it didn't matter who I was in conversation with. I wanted to be in conversation ultimately with people who were passionate about bettering themselves and transforming as individuals and as leaders of people. So I think that really shaped me, having to have that conversation with myself often and do a lot of self leadership around, okay, what is this saying about me? Am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? And ultimately, I was.
Love that. And so I know, Hakeem, that you also have this very interesting international affairs type background as well. What motivated you to become a coach?
Yeah, I remember going over to Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan for some work, not often on a short list of, spring break destinations, perhaps, but I found myself in Kyrgyzstan and I was going there to help support some of my field staff in, proposal writing and report writing for some of the programs that we were administering overseas. And I noticed that there was, a real dearth of leadership. There was a real hunger for professional development and coaching and support. And when I connected with my field staff, which I have a unique ability to create that trust and rapport very quickly with people, and I did so with my field staff, I noticed that what they were really hungry for and yearning for was opportunities to to elevate their leadership, to advance themselves as professionals, as individual contributors, and ultimately as a team. So we pivoted a little bit and we ended up having some really powerful conversations about how they could operate better as a team and what the leader could do more of or less of. And that's really where I fell in love with, like, sort of the formal structure of coaching, because I realized these are the conversations I've always had. I wanted to have more of these, and I started tailoring my career to do more of that.
Great. So before we get in too deep with leadership, I want to know, what is your definition of a leader?
Mm. So very, very simply, I will say a leader is somebody who sees opportunity to better themselves in order to better those around them.
I like that definition. I like that definition a lot. So, we talk about leadership and leadership development a lot on this podcast. Back in episode 89, we touched on different leadership styles, and that was one of our most popular episodes. So, what are your thoughts on people utilizing different leadership styles?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it comes up a lot, as you can imagine. And I'm not surprised that it was a popular episode, because oftentimes when I'm doing trainings for groups of leaders, I'll go through, you know, 14 different leadership styles, and I'll describe them in detail and give examples. And then at the end, I'll ask this, slightly cheeky question where I'll say, "So, which one's the best?" And everyone will raise their hand and they'll say this one or that one, and give their reasons why. And they say, well, you're all wrong, or maybe you're all right, in that there's no one leadership style that is better than the other. I think a really effective leader has the ability to toggle across those leadership styles in a way that is appropriate for the person or people that they're leading, the situation that they find themselves in, the industry or business that they're in. And I think that leadership style also, people default to this idea of, this very structured, very set way of doing things as it pertains to a leadership style. But when I'm talking about leadership style with clients, I'm talking about what's most authentic to them. And leadership style really varies from person to person to person, because ultimately I want you to lead in a way that's most authentic and most comfortable for you, so that you can do that every single day. Because these leaders who wake up every day trying to reinvent themselves as this best leader, new kind of leader, strongest leader, whatever it might be, every day, it's just so exhausting and it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Hakeem. And I think a lot of that feeling or pressure to kind of adhere to this specific leadership style comes from a few different areas. I would guess you've seen this as well, but I've seen a lot of our organizational clients have a preference for different leadership methodologies and theories. One of the most common ones out there today is transformational leadership. So I was really excited that you are an expert in this area. For those who don't know, what is transformational leadership?
Yeah. So transformational leadership, as I see it, is a little bit of what I described a leader to be. I think it's someone who sees opportunity in everything, sees possibility in everything and everyone, and creates an environment where people can, as we all naturally do, evolve. They can transform as contributors to a project, to a process, to a team, to a culture. And if we try to put people in boxes constantly, ourselves included, it limits our ability to transform. And I think that, one of my declarations, without getting too like, hippy dippy, is like, I am the universe unfolding. This idea that we are always evolving. We are always, there's change always happening. And if we can embrace that and we can support that and we can nurture that, then it may work out that transformation serves our purpose, our shared goal really well. It may also mean that it doesn't, and that's okay too. And there's something else or somewhere else that person's better suited to operate in. But I think the transformation is just sort of an acceptance of the natural evolution of a professional.
Yeah. So, what do you think are some of the essential aspects of transformational leadership?
I think one of them is something we talk a lot about in training is this idea of just because you're right doesn't mean they're wrong. And it's this willingness to not always know everything, to not always have to have all the answers. I got into a pretty heated exchange with a client one time where we were talking about the role of a leader, and they were saying, it's my job, it's what I get paid to do to have all the answers. And they were pretty set on that being the role of a leader. I think transformational leadership, one of them is really listening to understand before being understood. I think that it's that openness and willingness to see other perspectives and to be open to other possibilities. And that's what allows, I think, sort of in the spirit of leading by example, others to do the same.
Yeah. And I would be interested, Hakeem, to know if you see this more common mindset play out. We work with organizations a lot, and one of the kind of main areas that we touch on a lot is what I call multi-generational workplace issues. And that mindset that's more authoritative in nature, and that I'm the leader, I'm the content process expert, everyone comes to me for everything. That more, and I'm just going to call it an authoritative leadership style for now. I tend to see that more of our clients who are baby boomers specifically
Mm.
generally kind of had that belief based on their generation. And I tend to see that younger generations, a lot of millennials, Gen Zers, they do not necessarily think of the leader as the person having all the answers, being the expert on everything, for a lot of reasons, one of which I think is because they know they can go online and find expert answers from someone
Yeah.
who might even
Yeah.
have more experience than your boss,
Yeah.
right? They're looking for something deeper in leadership. So I say that because, your example made me think about it, but I'm wondering, do you see any kind of trends among generations? The Career 101 podcast is brought to you by Fly High Coaching, where we help our clients soar to their full potential. More and more professionals and executives are setting out to achieve their career goals. But without the right support, it can be difficult, if not impossible. Whether you need career coaching, interview coaching, or a program with a professional resume and a LinkedIn makeover, we're here to help. Could your career use some 911? It's not uncommon for executives and professionals to feel a little overwhelmed, stuck, or confused when it comes to their career or income. There are other people who want to know how to ramp up their success, consistently achieve their goals, and make a bigger impact. After hundreds of clients came to me with the same issues, I started recording the patterns for the Career 911 Masterclass, solving the top 5 challenges executives and professionals have. In the free masterclass, I share the exact strategies our clients use to tackle the top 5 problems. Check out the link in our show notes. Like what I mentioned?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's access to information is a big one for sure. And the information isn't just for question answer. I think it's the information that allows us to understand the difference between whether people understand it in these terms or not, the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And generationally, I think just out of necessity, younger generations are having to have a much more growth oriented mindset. Things aren't as cut and dry, black and white, this or that. I operate from a place of both and, not either or. And I don't think that's common of people in my generation and older, because options were more limited, possibilities were a bit more reduced or selected. And I think that the ability for, both generations or multiple generations to be able to engage in a conversation where, again, just because I'm right doesn't mean you're wrong, comes into play. They realize that they're coming at it from a place of curiosity rather than of judgment. And they can say, I'm not here to determine whether or not you're right or you're wrong, but I'm actually just genuinely curious. Like, where did you come up with that? What has you thinking about it that way? From both sides helps to sort of break down the walls a bit, and then also create more of a culture of growth oriented mindset.
Yeah. So, how do you think transformational leaders are different from other leaders?
Great question. I think it's something that I tell my clients all the time, which they may or may not like to hear, but transformational leaders understand and accept that the work of leadership, whether it be self leadership or of leading others, it's a mountain with no top. It's not the kind of work that, there are 10 steps, and once you get to step 10, you're all done and cool. I'm the best leader ever. I don't need to do any more work. This is, the work never ends. It's ongoing. As we are evolving and changing, so do, our leadership skills and our view of the world and our view of ourselves. And it constantly needs iterations and reflection and, an audit. So I think transformational leaders understand that, not only of themselves, but of other people as well.
I love that. Leadership is a mountain with no top. That I think that is a great quote, definitely a writer downer for the people listening. So, Hakeem, a lot of our listeners know that I'm a nerd and I've got my master's in industrial and organizational psychology. And I remember we talked about transformational leadership a lot as just kind of one of the leadership styles that's really common in organizations. And I remember that being charismatic and charisma was a big part of that. Do you see that with your clients in terms of charisma being important when it comes to the transformational leadership style?
Hmm. I don't think so, honestly. I would probably disagree with that a little bit, because I think that, again, to place people in a specific, lane in which they need to operate from, that will ensure that they're more transformational than someone else who's less charismatic or whatever it might be,
Mhm.
ends up creating an opportunity for stories that we all sort of fall victim to, where, oh, that person's more charismatic than me, I must not have the capacity to be a transformational leader.
Right.
And I think it's less about charisma and more about connection. I think it's people's ability to connect. Now, if you're not a strong connector, if you don't care about people, if you don't want to build rapport and trust with people, it's going to be very challenging to be a transformational leader. I don't think that you have to be the most attractive or entertaining or charming person in the room to be a transformational leader, but I do think that you need to care about people and you need to be genuinely curious about them.
Yeah. So, what are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen professionals and executives make when it comes to utilizing the transformational leadership style?
Yeah, I sort of alluded to it already. I think that one of the biggest mistakes that, we all fall into this trap is just tell me what to do. Just give me the answer. Tell me what to say. What's the quick fix? What's the secret ingredient? What's the silver bullet solution? And I get that because we are, fast food nation. We want things quick and easy. I get that. This is not that kind of work. And as I mentioned, the mountain with no top, this is something that requires a lot of reflection, a lot of conversation, a lot of investment of time and energy and money. And I've certainly done that because I can only take my clients as far as I've taken myself. And I really believe that when it comes to leaders, you can only lead others as effectively as you can lead yourself. And that's why so much of my coaching is rooted in self-leadership, because the transformation that you can create within yourself, and it doesn't have to be this, big dramatic thing, but when you can see that there are parts of yourself that, you can hold lightly and that you can revisit and you can, from a place of non-judgment, work on and adjust and modify, then as you're able to do that and you understand what work goes into that, you can start to create that and support that in other people as well. So it's really just the needing the answer versus willing to put in the work to create the answer.
Yeah, leadership is definitely work. It sometimes I think can be an extra layer to someone's, job title, right? And then, there's cross-functional, collaboration and leadership and all of that too that can be thrown into the mix as opposed to just having direct reports. So it sounds like you're saying there are no easy answers to this, Hakeem, and I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think that while there are no easy answers, this doesn't have to be hard.
Mhm.
And I think that's the piece that I help create space for when I'm working with my clients is I want to uncomplicate leadership for people. I want people to love their leadership so that it doesn't feel like a burden, so it doesn't feel daunting, so it doesn't feel heavy. Because guess what? All the things you just described that goes into leadership, they feel a lot more complicated when things are heavy and dramatic and burdensome. And when you can lighten that load because you're clear on who you are as a leader, you become more confident. You're doing that with compassion for yourself and for others. All of a sudden, you wake up not dreading the day. You wake up thinking, I got this. I can handle this. This is going to be a good day. Whatever comes my way, I can handle this because I'm effective as a leader of myself first and foremost. And I know that I can do that for my team, for my business, for my family, whatever else it might be.
So, what are some additional tips that you can share to help people develop as a transformational leader?
I think the biggest one is just slowing down. I mean, I have a triangle diagram that I show, and when we sort of talk about, what all goes into results, and I break it down into action and mindset and views, opinions and beliefs, and values and priorities. And at the bottom, as I highlight it, and this is a coach of mine, Ryan Matthew, was using this in a different context, but I'm showing this from a leadership standpoint of creating results. We all want results. We all want a better performance. We all want better leadership. We all want a better life. We all want to get to work faster, whatever the result is that we're after. The bottom segment of that triangle, I always, do a little sort of dramatic pause and say, what do you all think it is? And they give ideas like, oh, it's legacy and it's purpose and it's all those things. I said, actually, it's just space.
Mhm.
Creating space for ourselves in the day to reflect and to notice, how was I feeling in that conversation? How did I show up in that conversation? If I were to have that conversation again, what would I want to do differently? We are all so busy. And again, jujitsu and baseball and 7-year-old twins and in-laws in town. And, my wife's running the marathon next week. And, all of these things that could keep us completely consumed by all of the day to day. But where are you creating space to actually slow down and reflect? So as a tip, I would just say, find that space And then when you start to notice some patterns, very lightly, from a place of non-judgment and, self-compassion, think about what you'd want to do differently and identify where the story is being told and what's actually fact in that scenario. And when you can anchor into what the facts are, then you're able to get a lot more clarity, and you can start more confidently making decisions and taking action.
I love those tips. I want to follow up on that. So,
Mm.
in your opinion, what do you think are some of the best tools or resources that people can use for developing transformational leadership?
So I think, well, coaching, of course, but no, I
Mhm.
mean, I think finding people in your network who are interested, doesn't have to be a coach, who are interested in having these types of conversations from a place of openness, from a place of vulnerability, um, from a place of non-judgment, where you feel like you are safe enough to share what's coming up for you. Oh, I had this really challenging day yesterday, and here's why I think it was a challenging day for me. And for them to reflect back to you, because none of this is done in a vacuum. We all have partners and colleagues and direct reports, and people are people, and we're managing a lot of different personality dynamics, and that's not lost on me. So doing this with other people is a really essential part of this. So I think the people around you are a huge resource. The other one, which I think I'd be remiss to not mention, is AI. AI, I'm not like an AI guru. I'm not an AI advocate per se, but I think that if you see it as a tool and you engage with it in a way where you can ask these questions and start to see what that exchange looks like, maybe that's the place you're most comfortable doing that. Maybe you're not comfortable doing that with another person right now. Well, ask those questions in AI, see what comes back. And then you'll start to see that you're asking different questions in different ways. And you're being a little more open, you're being a little honest, and the reflections back from that are causing you to think of things differently. And then you realize, I want to do this with a real person. And you start doing that with your leadership team members. You start doing that with your direct reports. You want them to do that to you. So you create the space for that. And that's a great resource that is, readily available for anybody.
That is a great tool and suggestion. So, tell us more about your business.
So the fractional coaching that I do is something that was born out of my love of one-on-one coaching. So I had a lot of one-on-one clients that I was working with, CEOs, COOs, founders of startups. And one by one, each of them kept saying, I wish that so-and-so could have a conversation with you. I wish that, you could have this session with someone else on my leadership team. And, finally, after boing, boing, boing over the head, hearing it over and over again, I finally said, well, why don't we do that? Like, why don't we actually create that level of access for other members of your team or other members of your leadership team to engage with me? And the fractional coaching was born out of that, so that coaching isn't done in a vacuum. It's almost got, a sort of a 360 feel to it. And we start using the same language, we start buying into the same philosophy, vision. There's a lot more alignment. I know all the players, so that when someone's talking about a colleague who they had a challenging run-in with, they're not foreign to me. I know that person, I know how they think, I know how they communicate. I can be much more valuable in that conversation. So that's what I've really been focusing my business on, is the fractional coaching. And I love having conversations with people that sort of unlock those possibilities of what coaching can do.
We'll be providing a link to your website and social channels in our show notes so people can find you online. But what is the best way for someone to get in touch with you?
Thank you. LinkedIn, I'm all over LinkedIn. You can find me, Hakim A. Lakhdar. And obviously, my website is available as well, lakhdarcoaching.com. And my email address is hakim@lakhdarcoaching.com. I always check all my emails, and I'm pretty responsive. So anyone can reach out to me any of those ways, and I'm happy to connect.
Great. So now, Hakeem, I want to ask you our final question that I ask all of our guests. How do you think executives or professionals can get a positive edge in their career?
Hmm. I think a positive edge, this is a very coachy response, I know, is to gain clarity around what that edge would create for you. And it's almost a bit of a reverse engineering. sometimes, again, this goes back to like, just give me the answer. What's the positive edge I can create? How can I create it? And my answer or my question would probably be, what are you trying to create? What do you want to have come from that edge, whatever that edge might be? So rather than fixate on the how or the when that's going to happen, what is it that you're trying to produce? What is it what's the vision for what that edge will provide for you or your team or your company and or your career? And I think that when you realize, as I did, in my career, wow, I really love coaching. I really love developing people. I didn't care who it was with. I didn't care where it was. My career blossomed and I found myself just growing more and more passionate about what I did. People around me felt that, and it just naturally elevated my career because I was so clear on who I was and what I brought to the table and what I wanted to do and who I wanted to do it with. And I think that's the clarity piece is something that really ought not be overlooked.
Great point. So, Hakeem, you've shared a lot of wisdom with us today, and I'm sure our listeners can use it to be more confident in their careers and with their leadership. We appreciate you being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
This episode was brought to you by the Bravebird Career Alliance, the go-to membership designed for seasoned executives and ambitious professionals with everything you need for career planning, strategy, training, and support. Thank you again for listening to the Career 101 podcast. I hope you have at least one key takeaway that you can use in your own career. If you enjoyed hanging out with us, please rate, subscribe, and share this podcast. Until next time, here's to your success.